Welcome, my name is Aaron Wolf. I am an Adobe Connect product specialist with Caresoft, and today I'd like to spend a few minutes of your time to talk with you about the HTML5 client for Adobe Connect, such as how to check to see if your rooms are enabled for it, how to enable your rooms, how to begin using the HTML5 client, some of its features and functionalities, and some yet functionalities yet to come, and so forth in the coming months and so forth. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that your Adobe Connect account um, is able to run the HTML5 client. And it's very easy to determine this. If your Adobe Connect account is running versions 10.1 or later, I think in this instance it means 10.1 or 10.2, you can run the HTML5 client for any of your rooms that you would want to run. Now, how do we enable the rooms to have them be HTML5 enabled and so forth? So the first thing we want to do is log into your Adobe Connect account, like you see here. We're going to find the meeting room in question that we want to check to see if it's enabled, and if not, we want to enable it. We would have to do this for each and every room that we'd want to enable and so forth. So in this instance, I'm going to check on my room, Aaron's demo room. I just want to click on edit information, and just under the HTML client section, I want to just make sure that that box is checkmarked, where it says enable HTML client for participants. If it is, I'm good, the room is enabled. If not, I will check mark it and I will click save, and we're all good to go, and so forth. Now, it's very easy to get your attendees into your room when the HTML5 client is enabled. You'll just send them the link of the room. They'll come in as a guest, most likely. I'm right here, I'm gonna say Bob, my guest. As soon as he clicks enters the room, he's going to get a couple options. You can come in via the browser or the application. It's his choice, and so forth. Obviously, if he has the application, we would encourage you to run the application just because a lot of the features and functionalities are there, and we'll talk about those here in a few minutes. But if he doesn't have the application, he doesn't want to have to worry about downloading it, click on open browser, easy peasy lemon squeezy, he'll be in the room in a matter of a few seconds. No downloads. Boom, that easy, and so forth. So you'll notice the first thing you'll probably notice about this room is it looks a lot different than your traditional Adobe Connect view. In fact, if we were to compare this view with the traditional view, you see they do look a little bit different, and so forth, and so forth. So the newer HTML5 client, it's a little bit cleaner, a little bit more modern, a little bit more up to date, if you will, but a lot of the functionality is still here, and so forth. So let's take a look at this one pod at a time. So the first pod you see right here is the chat pod. One of the things I really like about the chat pod is as you are typing, it actually separates the chat out from everybody else, and so forth. Welcome to our meeting, and so forth. You notice your specific chat is on one side, everyone else's chat is on the other side. It helps separate it out, makes it a little bit easier to see. Also, you'll see that the bubbles are colored differently, helps bring out that chat a little bit differently. If you compare that to the traditional view, you'll see it's kind of dramatic, the difference, and so forth. Traditional view, you see everybody is in the one single column, and everybody's mixed, and there's no differentiation other than the names to tell, okay, which chat is whose, and so forth. So that's the chat pod. A lot of the functionalities are still there. You can't really, you can change your text size, you can change your text color, you can turn the sounds on or off, and so forth. So a lot of that from the participant point of view is pretty standard compared to the traditional view of Adobe Connect, the application view. In the participant pod, or the attendee pod right here, very similar, I guess you could say. Now, the one thing we want to stress here at this point is the HTML5 client is only at this point for participants. If you are going to be in a host or presenter role, you'll either be in the application or you'll be in the Flash-based version of Adobe Connect. Again, HTML5 is only for participants. So from the attendee pod point of view of the participants, it's fairly standard compared to what it would be for the application view. The participants can still see who's in the room, the number of people, who's in the various roles, and so forth and so on. The pod above that is the camera pod. Now, the attendees cannot turn on their camera in HTML5, but I, as the host, sure can. And I can turn it on right there. I can present my camera just as I always would. I can pause it. Very, very nice and easy. I can still do that. You can have multiple people from in the host and the presenter's roles. They can turn on their cameras. Just as it stands right now, participants are not able to turn on their cameras. If you were to promote somebody from the participant role into a presenter or a host role, and they were originally in the room as a participant, in HTML5, upon the attempt to promote them to presenter or host, they would be requested to join the room in either the application or the Flash-based version of Adobe Connect and so forth and so on. So that's in a nutshell the attendee pod, the webcam pod, and the chat pod. I'm gonna turn on my camera here. If we look at the lower left part, we see the Notes pod. Now the Notes pod again is only for hosts and presenters in all versions of Adobe Connect. You know, Flash-based application, um, and HTML5 and so forth. Again, if I was to promote Bob to presenter or host, it would ask that he join via the application or the Flash version of Adobe Connect. But at least they can still see the notes, you know, and so forth. As the notes I'm typing right here, you know, this is right here. This is me typing my notes as we have our team meeting. At least I can still see the notes and so forth and so on. If I was to give Bob, if I was to attempt to give him what we call enhanced participants rights and so forth, I would not be able to, because him at this way it stands right now, the participants cannot use enhanced participants rights at all and so forth. So I wouldn't even be able to say, okay, Bob, I need you to take notes here. And the reason why he wouldn't be able to is because he is in HTML5. Now, if he came into the room via the application or the Flash version, I could instantly say, okay, Bob, I need you to take notes. I'm going to give you control of the notes pod and the notes pod alone and so forth. So, but at least they can still see the notes pod and so forth. The pod above it, the polling pod, so they can still answer the polling pod questions and so forth. They can answer it. I, as the host, can see exactly how they've answered it and so forth. And I can see exactly whether or not they've answered it at all and so forth. Now, I can also see as the host, I can see who has come into the room and the HTML5 role. And this is really important because if I look at the attendee pod right here, I see that Bob is listed as a participant, but notice his color of his room. It's actually blue, the color of his name, I should say. That tells me that he come in via the HTML5 client. If his name is entirely in blue and so forth. And that's a good thing to notice in on. So if you've got your rooms enabled in HTML5, you start seeing people in the attendee pod and their names are listed entirely blue. That's a good thing to hone in on because there are some additional functionality limitations especially with the share pod. Now we've talked about a couple of them, such as, you know, participants can't turn on their webcams and so forth, and they can't be given the ability to write in the notes pod and so forth. But the SharePod has a lot of these functionality limitations as we stand right now. The big one is if I was to actually load in a PDF here into the SharePod, you'll notice right here in the big SharePod, it says feature under development. To see this content, switch to classic view. As it stands right now, this is how it is for right now. Eventually this is going to get fixed so that when I load the PDF, the PowerPoint, the MP4 into the SharePod, in the classic view, it's rendered in the HTML5. I think that comes out later this year. Time frame, I'm not sure exactly when. But there is a there is a workaround this and so forth. And what I would do is, instead of sharing this in the SharePod, what I would do is I would just come here and I would just actually just share my desktop and so forth. Share my desktop, boom, right here, come here, and now I can just share it this way. And you can actually see it and so forth. Not the most ideal way right now, but at least we can still share that PDF with you. You can still see it and so forth. We'd rather, you know, obviously load it to the SharePod, but it's nice that we can still just screen share it and you can still see the content and so forth and so on like that. When I'm done screen sharing, I'll just click here. Let me, right there, I'll click stop screen sharing. And then we're back to the room and so forth. Now, if you want to have a full list of exactly the functionalities that are currently enabled and currently on the roadmap to be enabled, this is a great link that you can find. In fact, I think if you Google Adobe Connect HTML5 functionalities and so forth, right here, it's one of the. So if you Google Adobe Connect HTML functionalities, this first link right here will have the list of exactly what is enabled in the HTML5 client, such as, the chat pod is fully enabled. Again, webcam sharing their video streams is coming soon for participants, and so forth. Viewing the content in the share pod is coming soon. Viewing shared content like whiteboard annotations, those are coming soon, and so forth. I'm not sure exactly when those are to be coming out. The time frame is later in 2019. Exact time frame to be determined, but they at least are on the wrap. They are being developed. They will come out eventually, which is kind of nice to know that the product is only going to get better, and so forth. So you can still use a lot of the functionality of Adobe Connect. It's very, very easy to get your attendees into the room via the HTML5 client, and so forth. And the nice thing about it, it doesn't require any downloads. Quick, easy way to get them in, have your session, and be done with it, and so forth. So that is all.